8-year-old girl calls 911 after locking herself in room and says 3 words when the police arrive. Everyone is in shock. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where people smiled at each other on the streets, where neighbors brought over freshly baked pies, and where doors were often left unlocked. It was a picturesque town, one that seemed untouched by the darkness of the outside world. And within this town, on a quiet suburban street, stood the Callahan house. It was the kind of home you'd see in a family Christmas card. White picket fence, a neatly trimmed lawn, a cozy porch with 2 rocking chairs. Inside lived Henry Callahan, a decorated police officer, his wife Evelyn, a soft-spoken school teacher, and their 8-year-old daughter Lily. To the outside world, they were the picture of perfection. But perfection is often just a well-painted mask. Lily Callahan sat by her bedroom window, clutching her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Whiskers, as she watched the streetlights flicker to life. The sun had just set, and she knew that meant her father would be home soon. Her small hands gripped the plush toy tightly. She had learned to measure time by the way her stomach twisted in knots. Downstairs, Evelyn stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup with a forced smile. The radio played softly in the background, a desperate attempt to create normalcy. She kept glancing at the clock, her grip on the wooden spoon tightening. She knew what was coming. Then came the sound, the familiar growl of an engine pulling into the driveway. The headlights sliced through the curtains, casting ominous shadows on the walls. Evelyn inhaled sharply. Lily flinched. Even Mr. Whiskers seemed to tremble in her arms. The front door opened. Heavy footsteps echoed against the hardwood floor. Henry was home. "Smells good," his deep voice rumbled. He placed his police hat on the table, running a hand through his short, graying hair. He was a man of presence, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp blue eyes that could be both charming and chilling. Evelyn forced a smile. "Dinner's almost ready." Lily remained frozen upstairs, listening intently. She knew better than to come down without being called. Her father had rules, many rules, and breaking them had consequences. Henry walked over to the fridge, grabbing a cold beer. As he popped the cap, his eyes flicked to Evelyn. "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. He chuckled under his breath. "You're a terrible liar, Eve." The room tensed. Lily squeezed her eyes shut. Evelyn swallowed, choosing her words carefully. "It's just been a long day." Henry took a slow sip, watching her like a predator sizing up prey. Then, as if deciding it wasn't worth the effort tonight, he exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "Well, at least I'm home now." That was the thing about Henry Callahan. He wasn't always a monster. There were nights when he would kiss Evelyn's forehead, tuck Lily in, and laugh as they watched TV together. But then, there were nights when the mask slipped, when the warmth drained from his eyes, replaced by something cold and merciless. Those were the nights that haunted Lily. She stayed silent, sitting in the dim glow of her nightlight, listening to the muffled voices downstairs. Her stomach churned. She never knew which version of her father would emerge. Her tiny hands trembled as she traced the stitches on Mr. Whiskers' ear, whispering to him as if he could protect her. Maybe tonight will be a good night. She wanted to believe it, but deep down, she knew better. And as the shadows deepened in her small bedroom, Lily Callahan made a silent vow. One day, she would find a way out. The next morning, Lily Callahan sat at the breakfast table, her spoon clinking softly against the ceramic bowl of oatmeal. She wasn't hungry, but she knew better than to leave it untouched. Across from her, Evelyn sipped her coffee with a distant stare, dark circles forming beneath her tired eyes. Henry was gone for the day, off to his job at the Willow Creek Police Department, where he was admired and respected, where no one saw what happened inside their home. Lily glanced up at her mother. "Can I have lunch at school today?" Evelyn hesitated. Henry preferred Lily to eat homemade meals, proper meals, he called them. He liked control even over the smallest details, but today, Evelyn nodded. Okay, I'll give you lunch money. Lily let out a small breath of relief. It wasn't much, but it meant a break. A few extra minutes of peace away from home. Outside, the school bus honked. Evelyn kissed her daughter's forehead. Be good today. Lily hugged her tight before dashing out the door, gripping her backpack like a lifeline. Willow Creek Elementary School was filled with bright posters, colorful bulletin boards, and the smell of crayons and freshly sharpened pencils. It should have been a comforting place, but lately Lily felt like she was walking through a fog. Lily, she turned to see Maggie Lewis, her best friend, running up to her. Maggie had wild red curls and a gap-toothed grin that always made Lily smile. At least it used to. "Want to sit with me at lunch?" Maggie asked, bouncing on her heels. Lily hesitated. She didn't want to talk much these days. She felt different from the other kids, like she was carrying something too heavy for her small body. But Maggie was patient. She never pushed. "Yeah," Lily said quietly. At lunch, they sat at their usual table. Maggie chattered about her new puppy and how she'd begged her parents for weeks. Lily nodded, but her mind drifted. Across the cafeteria, Miss Carter, her teacher, was watching. Miss Carter had been teaching second grade for nearly 20 years. She had a warm smile, but she also had sharp instincts. And lately, she had noticed a change in Lily Callahan. She had always been a bright student, eager to participate. But now her shoulders were always tense. Her head down, her voice softer than before. The child that once laughed with her friends now sat in silence, as if she were somewhere else entirely. "Lily?" Miss Carter's voice made Lily jump. She turned, her heart hammering. "Are you feeling okay today?" the teacher asked gently. Lily forced a nod. "I'm fine." Miss Carter studied her for a moment. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Lily managed a small smile before looking down at her tray. She wished she could believe that. That afternoon, as Lily walked home, she felt it. The familiar weight in her chest. Fear. She knew that tonight wouldn't be a good night. And she was right. Henry Callahan came home later than usual, the scent of beer clinging to him. Evelyn had set the table, making sure everything was perfect, just the way he liked it. But Henry wasn't in the mood for perfection. Lily sat quietly, staring at her plate, heart pounding as Henry's voice grew sharper. Then came the sound. A plate shattering against the wall. Lily flinched. Evelyn moved quickly, trying to calm him, but Henry wasn't listening. His hands curled into fists, his face dark with something dangerous. Lily's breathing grew shallow. Her mother looked at her, eyes wide with silent warning. "Go upstairs." Lily ran. She slammed her bedroom door shut, locking it with trembling hands. Pressing her back against the wood, she squeezed her eyes shut as the shouting continued downstairs. Her fingers hovered over the drawer where her mother kept an old cell phone. She had never dared to use it. Never dared to break the rules. But tonight, something inside her cracked. With shaking hands, Lily grabbed the phone and dialed 911. A voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. I need help. The cold metal of the phone felt foreign in Lily's small hands. She had only seen her mother use it a few times, always in moments of desperation. 911 had never been a number she thought she'd call. At least, not from this house. But tonight, she was different. She had no choice. The voice on the other end was calm, steady. What's the problem, sweetie? Can you tell me your name? Lily's throat tightened. She wanted to answer, but words were like stones in her mouth. She gripped Mr. Whiskers harder, pressing the stuffed rabbit against her chest for comfort. I'm scared, Lily managed to whisper. My daddy. He's angry. The operator's voice softened. Okay, sweetheart, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me where you are? Lily's hand shook as she looked around her room. Her gaze flicked toward the window, where the fading light from the street lamp outside cast long shadows across the walls. She could hear her father's voice booming downstairs, and her heart began to race. I'm in my room, she said quickly. I locked the door. Good girl, the operator replied. Now I need you to stay on the phone with me, okay? I'm sending someone to help. Just stay where you are. Lily nodded silently, feeling her breath quicken. She had done it. She had called for help. But as the seconds stretched into minutes, her sense of fear only deepened. What would happen when the police arrived? What would her father do if he found out what she'd done? Downstairs, the argument was escalating. Evelyn's voice was now barely audible beneath Henry's roar. He was angry, furious that things weren't perfect. Lily had seen it before, the rage that simmered beneath his polished exterior. To the outside world, Henry was a hero, a respected officer in the community. But in their home, he was something else entirely. The mask was slipping, and the real Henry was beginning to show. Outside, the night had grown darker, and a set of flashing red and blue lights illuminated the street. Officer Daniels, a young patrolman who had been with the department for just over a year, parked his cruiser in the driveway of the Callahan home. His hand shook slightly as he reached for the door handle. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but when a child calls 911, something wasn't right. He approached the front door, knocking sharply 3 times. He could hear shouting inside. Muffled but unmistakable. It sounded like a man and a woman. He didn't know the Callahans personally, but their reputation preceded them. Henry Callahan was an upstanding officer. Everyone in town admired him. He was strong, dependable, respected. But there was something off. Daniels couldn't place it. But a chill ran down his spine as he stood on the porch waiting for someone to answer. He knocked again. Moments later, Evelyn appeared at the door. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying. She looked as though she had aged years in a matter of minutes. She opened the door slightly, glancing nervously at the flashing lights outside. "Officer, what's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, I'm here because we received a call from your daughter," Officer Daniels said, trying to keep his voice steady. "She said she's scared. Is everything okay?" Evelyn's eyes widened in panic. She glanced back toward the hallway, where the sound of Henry's booming voice carried. "Please," Evelyn said, her voice breaking. He's not himself tonight. Please just go back." But Daniels didn't back down. He stepped forward, his voice firm. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to let me in. We're going to make sure everything is okay." Evelyn hesitated, the weight of the moment settling in her chest. But she knew there was no escaping what was about to happen. The truth, for better or worse, was coming out. Inside, Lily could hear the voices growing louder. Henry was coming for her. She scrambled off her bed, heart pounding, but she didn't know where to hide. The walls of her room suddenly felt too small, too suffocating. Then came the knock at the door again, louder this time, more insistent. Her breath caught in her throat. Was this it? Were they here to take him away? She could hear footsteps outside her door, the creak of the floorboards. She scrambled to the corner of her room, clutching Mr. Whiskers so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The doorknob rattled. She held her breath. Then the voice she feared most, the one she had always tried to ignore, boomed from the hallway. "Lily!" "Henry." Lily didn't move. She squeezed her eyes shut, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if she stayed still enough. If she didn't make a sound, everything would go back to normal. But it was too late. The door swung open. Henry stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. His blue eyes were no longer the eyes of the man she knew. Those eyes were cold, distant, and full of something dark. "Lily," he snarled, stepping into the room. "What did you do?" But before Lily could speak, she heard another voice. "Step away from her." Officer Daniels had arrived. The tension in the room thickened, heavier than it had ever been. Lily stood frozen in place, clutching Mr. Whiskers to her chest like a shield. Her heart raced, each beat thundering in her ears. She had never seen her father like this, never. The man who had once read her bedtime stories and held her close was now a stranger, standing in the doorway like a storm ready to tear everything apart. Officer Daniels took a step forward, his hand resting on the radio at his belt. His eyes never left Henry, who was still glaring at Lily, his fists clenched at his sides. The silence between them was suffocating. "Lily," Henry said, his voice low and dangerous. "What did you do?" Lily's breath hitched, but before she could speak, Evelyn appeared at the door, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Henry, stop it, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. Henry didn't move. He didn't even look at her. His focus was solely on Lily, who shrank back into the corner of the room. The chaos downstairs was still reverberating in her head, the sounds of broken glass, the angry shouts. She had never wanted to be the reason for any of it. But now there was no turning back. "You called the cops?" Henry's voice was barely a whisper, but the venom in his words was unmistakable. "You embarrassed me." Lily felt her stomach drop. She didn't understand. Wasn't it supposed to be the other way around? Weren't the police supposed to help when people were in trouble? She began, her voice barely audible. "Don't you dare," Henry snapped, taking a step toward her. But Officer Daniels was quicker. He stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from your daughter." Henry blinked as if the words didn't quite register at first. Then the fury in his eyes grew darker, more intense. "Who the hell do you think you are?" He took a step forward, chest puffed out, preparing to challenge the officer. But Evelyn moved swiftly, her voice trembling. "Henry, please." Henry paused, his gaze flicking to Evelyn. She looked so small, so fragile. And for a moment, just a split second, something shifted in his eyes, a glimmer of doubt. But it was gone before it could take root. Lily saw it. She saw the flash of humanity in him, the part of him that loved her, even if it was buried beneath layers of anger and control. But that part was fading fast. "Get out of my way," Henry growled, his voice a low threat. Officer Daniels didn't move. His hand remained on his belt, fingers brushing against the handcuffs there. "Sir," he said, his tone steady, "I'm not going to ask you again. Step away." The silence in the room stretched between them, an unbearable chasm. Lily could feel her heart hammering in her chest, her pulse racing. She wanted to run, wanted to escape, to vanish into the walls of her room. But then something unexpected happened. Henry's shoulders slumped. The anger drained out of him, leaving behind a hollow, broken man. For a moment he just stood there, looking down at Lily, his face a mix of rage and regret. It was like watching the weight of his actions press down on him. But he didn't know how to carry it. "You're not getting away with this, Henry," Evelyn said, her voice trembling but firm. "I won't let you hurt our daughter anymore." There was a long pause, and for a split second it seemed as if Henry might collapse right there on the floor. But then, with a sharp inhale, he stepped back, looking away from Evelyn, from Lily, and from Officer Daniels. "Fine," he muttered, his voice rough. "You win. I'm done." Evelyn didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. She had seen this before, the moment where Henry seemed to surrender only to come back with more venom later. But this time was different. This time, something inside him had cracked. Officer Daniels moved toward the door. "Ma'am, we're taking Henry in for questioning," he said to Evelyn, his voice more gentle now. "We'll need to talk to Lily as well." Evelyn nodded, still in shock. She looked at Lily, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and relief. Lily's knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stand. She had done it. She had called for help. And now she would tell the truth. The police car in the driveway was a stark reminder of what had just happened. Evelyn stood by the front door, her arms wrapped around herself as she watched the officers take Henry away. Her world had been shattered, but there was a strange sense of freedom that came with it. The nightmare she had lived through for years, the fear, the control, the constant walking on eggshells was finally starting to unravel. Lily stood beside her mother, her small hand gripping Evelyn's, not quite understanding what would happen next. She didn't know if the world would change overnight, but she knew one thing for sure. Things couldn't stay the same. She had taken a step toward freedom, even if it meant facing the consequences. And somewhere deep inside, Lily knew she would never be the same again. The night had fallen like a heavy blanket over the Callahan house. The flashing lights of the police cars had long since disappeared down the street, leaving only the echo of tires against wet pavement. The house was eerily silent now. save for the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath their feet. Lily sat on the couch in the living room, her hands folded in her lap. Her mother, Evelyn, sat beside her, still too shaken to speak. They hadn't moved for what seemed like hours, as if the very act of standing up might bring the nightmare crashing back. There had been no arguing when the police had taken Henry away, no desperate pleas for him to stay. He had left the house in handcuffs, his face pale and hollow, his eyes not even meeting theirs. Evelyn had barely acknowledged it, too lost in the moment to process what had just happened. But now, as the silence stretched on, reality began to set in. Lily's mind raced. What had she done? Was it really over? Was her father going to be gone forever? "Mom." Lily's voice trembled as she spoke, breaking the silence between them. "Is he coming back?" Evelyn turned to her daughter, her face a mask of sorrow. She reached out and gently took Lily's hand in hers. "I don't know, baby," she whispered. "I don't know." The words hung in the air, heavy and full of uncertainty. Evelyn didn't have any answers. The truth was, she wasn't sure if Henry would ever come back to the man he used to be, the man she had once loved. The truth was, she wasn't even sure who he was anymore. Just then, the front door creaked open. Both Evelyn and Lily jumped, their hearts racing. It was Maggie, the next-door neighbor. Maggie had been a constant presence in their lives, always kind and thoughtful. But tonight, there was a gravity in her step, a tension in her eyes that made Evelyn's stomach twist. "Maggie?" Evelyn said softly, standing to greet her. "Is everything okay?" Maggie hesitated, looking over at Lily before she spoke. I heard what happened." Evelyn stiffened. "You know?" Maggie nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Lily, the whole neighborhood's talking. People are worried about you both." Evelyn nodded, her lips trembling. She hadn't expected the gossip to spread so quickly. But the truth was, it didn't matter. Not anymore. Maggie took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "Evelyn, I think it's time you both spoke to someone. You know, a counselor. I can't imagine what you've been through. But you don't have to do this alone." Evelyn stiffened. She had been so focused on surviving, on protecting Lily, that she hadn't even considered what came next. The idea of talking to someone about what Henry had done, about the years of pain and fear she had hidden away, was terrifying. But Maggie was right. It was time to face the truth. "Maybe," Evelyn whispered, "maybe we will." As Maggie left, Evelyn stood at the door, staring into the quiet night. She had always been the one who held it all together, the one who kept the family intact. But now, with Henry gone, there was a gaping hole in her heart. The life she had built, shattered. The man she had loved, gone. And Lily. Lily was still just a child, too young to fully understand, but old enough to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Evelyn?" Lily's voice broke through her thoughts. Evelyn turned, meeting her daughter's gaze. "I'm scared," Lily whispered. "What happens now?" Evelyn knelt down in front of Lily, holding her face in her hands. "Sweetheart, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But you did something brave tonight. You called for help, and that was the right thing to do." Lily nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "But what about Dad?" Evelyn paused. What could she say? The truth? The truth was too painful, too raw, but she couldn't lie to her daughter. "Your dad," Evelyn started, her voice faltering. "He needs help, Lily. And until he gets it, we can't go back to the way things were. But you don't have to be afraid anymore. We're going to be okay." Lily bit her lip, trying to hold back the tears that had been threatening to spill all night. "Will he come back? Will we go back to the way things were?" Evelyn shook her head gently. "No, sweetie, we can't go back, but we can go forward, together." It was the hardest thing she had ever said, but it was the truth. The days that followed were a blur. The police had been in and out of the house taking statements and gathering evidence. Henry had been arrested and was being held for questioning. Evelyn didn't know when he would be released or what would happen next, but she wasn't sure she was ready to face it. Lily had withdrawn into herself, spending most of her time in her room. She was no longer the carefree little girl who had once run through the house, her laughter echoing in every corner. Now, there was a heaviness to her every step, a quiet sadness that lingered in her eyes. Evelyn knew that Lily needed more than just words of comfort. She needed someone to help her process the trauma. She needed a counselor. They both did. But the thought of reliving the years of abuse, of confronting the reality of what Henry had done to them both, made her stomach turn. But she couldn't ignore it any longer. Lily deserved to be heard. They both did. That afternoon, while Lily was upstairs, Evelyn sat down at the kitchen table, her hands shaking as she dialed the number for a local therapist. She knew it wouldn't be easy. Nothing about this would be. But it was a start. A small voice at the top of the stairs caught her attention. "Mom?" Evelyn looked up to see Lily standing at the top of the staircase, her small figure framed in the doorway. "Yeah, sweetie?" Evelyn asked, her heart aching as she saw the uncertainty in Lily's eyes. Lily hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry for what I did." Evelyn's heart broke at the words. She shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, baby, you did the right thing. You saved us." Lily slowly descended the stairs, her gaze never leaving her mother's. "But I'm scared. What if it's not over?" Evelyn pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her close. "It's over, Lily. We're going to be okay now." And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn believed it. The decision was clear now, though it felt like the heaviest weight Evelyn had ever carried. She had spoken with the therapist, made the appointments, and even taken Lily to her first session. But the real test hadn't even begun. That would come when they faced Henry, or what was left of him. It had been nearly a week since Henry's arrest, and Evelyn still hadn't fully processed the events that had led to this moment. The truth about the man she had once loved had shattered her like glass, leaving her questioning every part of their shared history. She had always believed that the good in him could outweigh the bad. Now she wasn't so sure. Lily, on the other hand, had begun to show signs of improvement. She was speaking again, her smile returning in small doses, but there was a wariness to her that hadn't been there before. She was cautious, as if the world was a place she couldn't fully trust anymore. The counselor had told them it would take time, that it would be a long journey. But Evelyn didn't know if she was ready to take that journey, not when the road ahead was so unclear. One evening after dinner, Evelyn found herself sitting in the dimly lit kitchen, staring out the window at the quiet suburban street. The neighborhood was still. But inside, she felt as though a storm was brewing. She hadn't seen Henry since the day the police had taken him away, but that was about to change. She had received a letter, one of the many pieces of paper that had come through the door in the past week, from the police, from the lawyers, from his family. But this letter was different. It was from Henry himself, and the words on the page were as cold and calculated as she had feared. "Evelyn, I know you're angry. I know you don't understand why I did what I did. But I need you to know something. I did it all for you. You and Lily are my world, and now you're tearing it apart. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the things I did that hurt you. But I can't let this go. We are a family, and I want to fix this. You have to come back to me. Meet me at the old cabin. It's where we first met. I'll be waiting." Evelyn felt her breath catch in her throat as she read the words again, her hands trembling. A part of her wanted to scream, to tear the letter to pieces, but another part, one she hadn't expected, felt a pull. It was a dangerous feeling, one she knew she shouldn't trust. She couldn't deny that Henry had always known how to manipulate her. He was good at it, too good. She had seen it for years. The way he could make her feel guilty for things she didn't do, the way he could twist her emotions until she was questioning her own sanity. It had started subtly, back when they were young. But now, it was as though the chains that had bound her for so long were breaking, and she was beginning to see it all for what it was. But there was that voice that had always been in the back of her mind, telling her that Henry wasn't a monster, that he could be saved, that they could fix this. Her heart told her that it was a lie, but her emotions, Her history whispered otherwise. "Lily," Evelyn called softly, standing up from the table. Lily emerged from the hallway, her expression cautious but curious. "What is it, Mom?" Evelyn looked at her daughter, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She could see it in Lily's eyes. The same uncertainty, the same fear. They had both been broken, but the question was whether they could ever rebuild. "Sweetheart," Evelyn began, her voice strained, "I just received a letter from your father." She could see the way Lily's face went pale, her eyes wide with concern. You're not going to see him, are you?" Lily's voice cracked, the terror in her tone unmistakable. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I don't know what to do anymore, Lily. I want to believe that things can go back to the way they were, but I don't think they can." Lily stepped forward, her small hand reaching up to touch her mother's arm. "Mom, you don't have to go back. We don't need him. We'll be okay. We're okay without him." Evelyn's heart broke as she looked down at her daughter. She could see the depth of her pain in that simple statement. Lily had grown up so much in such a short time, and Evelyn couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for what her daughter had endured. "But what if—" Evelyn started. But Lily cut her off, her voice firm. "No, Mom, we don't need him. We can't go back." The truth of Lily's words hit Evelyn like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just about her. It was about Lily, too. She had been protecting her daughter for years, keeping her in the dark about the full extent of Henry's behavior. But now, the truth was out in the open and there was no turning back. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision she had to make. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't let Henry control them anymore. Not after everything. Not after everything he had put them both through. Evelyn stood tall, her voice shaking with emotion but resolute. "You're right, Lily, we can't go back. I won't let him hurt us anymore." Later that evening, Evelyn stood at the window, looking out over the darkening world outside. The letter was still in her hand, the words now meaningless. She had made her decision. But the hardest part was yet to come. She didn't know how to rebuild from here, how to put the pieces of her broken family back together. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let the past define their future. Not anymore. The night dragged on, the silence in the house thick, almost suffocating. Evelyn sat in the dim light of the living room, her fingers lightly tracing the edges of the letter from Henry. It felt like a lifeline, a thread that connected her to a past she couldn't quite let go of, yet knew she had to. She looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight and Lily was asleep in her room, blissfully unaware of the depth of the turmoil her mother was enduring. Evelyn couldn't escape the image of Henry's words in the letter, the way they pulled at her heartstrings despite everything. She remembered the man he had once been, charming, thoughtful, affectionate. That man seemed so far removed from the one now sitting in a jail cell, awaiting trial for crimes that had shattered her life and their daughters. But even as the memories swirled, she knew they were lies. They were the mask he had worn, a mask that had fallen to reveal a darker truth. She rose from the couch, pacing across the living room. The decision weighed on her like a 1,000-pound anchor. To go or not to go. To meet Henry at the cabin where their relationship had started, or to walk away and continue on the uncertain path ahead, one that promised healing but also more pain. Could she live with the regret if she never saw him again? Could she live with herself if she went and opened the door to more heartache? Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, hoping it would be a message from Lily's therapist, confirming their next session. But it wasn't. It was a message from the local police detective, Marcus Stevens. Evelyn's stomach dropped as she read it. "Evelyn, we need to talk. Please call me as soon as possible. It's about Henry." Her pulse quickened. What could it be? Had something happened to him? Was there more to the case? She dialed the number quickly, the phone ringing twice before Marcus picked up. "Detective Stevens," she said, trying to steady her voice. "It's Evelyn. Mrs. Gray." Marcus's voice was steady, but there was a note of urgency there. "I don't want to alarm you, but we've come across something important. Something that could change the course of this investigation. Evelyn's stomach tightened. What do you mean? What's going on? There's been a new development with Henry's case. We found something in his personal belongings that we hadn't seen before. Something that suggests he might have been planning something worse. He was in contact with people you don't know, people with criminal backgrounds. We believe he was involved in more than just what we've already charged him for. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Her mind raced. Was it possible? Could the man she had married, the man she had trusted for years, really have been capable of all this? I'm sorry, Marcus continued. I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to know that this is serious. It's not just about your daughter anymore. Henry's actions might be linked to something much bigger. Evelyn's mind spun. She thought of the times Henry had been distant, of the odd hours he'd kept, of the things he had said in moments of anger. Had she missed the signs? Or had she just refused to see them? Thank you for letting me know, Detective, Evelyn said, her voice trembling. I'll think about what to do next. After they hung up, Evelyn stared at the wall for what felt like an eternity. The walls seemed to close in around her. The truth, ugly and harsh, was becoming clearer, and with it came an overwhelming sense of dread. She glanced at the letter again, its cold message now taking on a darker tone. Henry had been planning something. That much was clear. And yet here he was reaching out to her, asking her to come back. It felt like a trap. But if there was a chance to stop whatever he was planning, to finally confront him in the place where it all started, Evelyn knew she couldn't ignore it. She had to go. The next morning, Evelyn woke early. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Lily was still asleep, and Evelyn had the chance to prepare herself, though she wasn't sure what she was preparing for. She packed a bag for the trip to the cabin, the one place she'd once thought of as their sanctuary. It was an hour's drive out of town, nestled deep in the woods, far away from anyone who could hear. The memories of their early days together flashed through her mind. The laughter, the warmth, the feeling of being truly seen. It all felt like a lifetime ago. As she pulled out of the driveway, Evelyn couldn't help but feel as though she was walking into a storm she wasn't sure she would survive. She kept the letter on the passenger seat, the words mocking her resolve with every turn of the wheels. The drive felt endless. She passed through familiar streets, but everything seemed different now. The trees lining the road were gnarled and dark, casting long shadows across the pavement. The world felt like a place she didn't belong anymore. When she reached the cabin, the place looked eerily abandoned, as though it had been untouched for years. The small wooden structure stood on a hill, surrounded by overgrown grass. It looked like it had once been a haven, but now it felt like a graveyard of memories, darkened by everything that had happened since. Evelyn took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. Her hands shook as she walked toward the door. She had no idea what to expect. Would Henry be there, waiting for her? Or was this just another cruel game he was playing? Another way to get under her skin. The door creaked as she opened it, and a wave of nostalgia hit her. The familiar scent of wood and pine, the old furniture covered in dust. It all seemed so distant now. She stepped inside, her heart pounding, and then she heard it, a soft rustling from the back of the cabin. "Henry?" she called out, her voice echoing in the empty space. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It wasn't Henry. The figure that emerged from the shadows was tall and lean, but not Henry. It was a man Evelyn had never seen before, yet there was something unsettlingly familiar about him. His eyes were dark and hollow, his face drawn tight in a way that suggested both calculation and something darker, something dangerous. He stepped forward into the weak light streaming from the open door, his movements slow, deliberate. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat and she instinctively took a step back. Her heart raced. Who was this man and what was he doing in Henry's cabin? "Who are you?" Evelyn asked, her voice trembling, but her resolve hardening with each word. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he smiled. A cold, hollow smile that made Evelyn's skin crawl. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was empty, as though he were playing a game with her. "Did you really think Henry would be here waiting for you?" His voice was smooth, almost mocking, but Evelyn could hear the edge to it. There was no warmth in his tone, just a detached, controlled menace. "He never cared about you, he never cared about anyone. You're just a pawn in his game." Evelyn swallowed hard. The world around her felt like it was closing in. She had so many questions, but there was no room for them now. The sense of danger was too immediate, too real. "Where is Henry?" she demanded, trying to steady herself. She had to focus, she had to get answers. "What have you done with him?" The man's smile faltered just for a moment, but then it was back, wider than before, almost amused. "Henry? He's where he belongs, don't worry about him," he said, as though it was the least important thing in the world. "But you should be worried." Evelyn's chest tightened. She needed to leave. She needed to get out of there, away from this man. Away from whatever nightmare Henry had become. But something in the man's presence kept her rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a sense of impending danger. "What do you want?" she asked, forcing her voice to stay strong, even though her heart was hammering in her chest. "Want?" The man's eyes gleamed with something almost playful. "I'm not the one with wants here. You're the one who came. You're the one who opened the door. The real question is why. Why did you come, Evelyn? Why did you think you could fix him?" Evelyn took a shaky step back, but the man moved with terrifying speed, blocking her way. She could feel the sweat on the back of her neck, the panic clawing at her insides. She didn't know what to say. She was a mother, a wife, a woman who had once believed in the goodness of the man she married, but that belief had been shattered piece by piece until there was nothing left but cold, raw truth. "I wanted to believe," she whispered, barely audible. The man's eyes softened for the briefest moment, and then he laughed, low and menacing. "Believe. That's the real trap, isn't it? Believing in something that was never there to begin with. You can't fix something that's broken beyond repair." "Evelyn." His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had tried over and over again to repair what had been shattered. She had tried for Lily, for the life they had once dreamed of. But now, standing in the shadow of this stranger, she realized how futile it all was. The man's gaze hardened again, the playful edge fading, replaced by something far more dangerous. "You shouldn't have come. Now you'll see what happens to people who don't listen, to people who don't know when to walk away." Before Evelyn could react, the man lunged forward, grabbing her arm with a strength that made her gasp. The pain shot up her arm and she instinctively tried to pull away, but he held her firm, his fingers digging into her flesh. His grip was unyielding. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice a low growl. "You've just made a mistake." The words sent a chill down her spine. She had no idea what he was going to do next. But she knew one thing. If she didn't get away, she wouldn't make it out of there alive. In that moment, something snapped inside her, a surge of adrenaline. She had been through hell, and she wasn't going to let this man, whoever he was, take away her chance at survival. With a swift motion, she drove her knee into his gut. He grunted in surprise, loosening his grip for just a second. That was all the time she needed. She yanked her arm free and stumbled back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The man's eyes flashed with fury, but Evelyn didn't stop. She ran for the door, for her life, just as her fingers brushed the handle. The man's voice echoed in the cabin, sending a jolt of terror through her. "You think this is over? You think you're going to get away from this?" His laugh was cold, cruel. "This is just the beginning, Evelyn." She didn't look back. She couldn't. The air around her felt thick, suffocating. She threw open the door and bolted outside, her heart pounding in her chest. The woods around her were eerily silent, as though the very earth held its breath. Her car was parked just beyond the driveway. The man's words rang in her ears, but she didn't have time to process them. She reached her car, throwing herself inside, slamming the door behind her. Her hands were shaking as she fumbled with the keys, desperate to start the engine. Finally, the car roared to life, and Evelyn sped off, her heart still racing, the image of the man still burned in her mind. She didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but one thing was clear. Henry's story wasn't the only one she needed to uncover. Evelyn's hands gripped the steering wheel with a vice-like hold as she sped through the winding roads, her eyes flicking nervously to the rearview mirror every few seconds. She had no idea if the man from the cabin had followed her, but the terror that gripped her chest refused to let go. The shadows of the night seemed to close in around her, and the quiet hum of the engine only intensified her racing thoughts. Who was he, and what did he mean by "this is just the beginning"? She couldn't shake the feeling that something dark, something far worse than she could imagine, was coming for her, and for Lily. She had to keep moving. The drive felt endless. But finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Evelyn saw the lights of a small local diner ahead. Her eyes caught the neon sign blinking in the dark. Harper's Diner, open 24 hours. She pulled into the parking lot, the gravel crunching under the tires. Her mind was whirling, but she knew one thing. She needed answers. The diner was a safe haven. At least that's what she told herself as she stepped out of the car. The bell above the door chimed softly as she entered, the warmth of the interior greeting her like an old friend. There were a few late-night patrons scattered around, some nursing coffee cups, others absorbed in their own conversations. Behind the counter, a tired waitress with salt and pepper hair gave her a polite nod as Evelyn approached. "Can I get you something, hun?" the waitress asked, her voice warm but tinged with exhaustion. Evelyn smiled faintly, her mind far from the ordinary requests of a late-night diner. "I need to use your phone," she said, her voice tight. "It's an emergency." The waitress studied her for a moment before nodding and pointing to the payphone in the corner. Evelyn's heart dropped into her stomach. The phone was old, vintage almost. She hadn't seen one like that in years. But she couldn't waste time. She rushed over to it, her fingers trembling as she dialed the familiar number. Her husband's number, Henry's. As the phone rang, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder, would he even pick up? Would he remember who she was, or would it be the version of him that no longer cared, the version of him that had led her here? Running for her life? The line clicked. "Hello?" Henry's voice was low and gruff as though he had just woken up. Evelyn froze. It felt surreal hearing his voice again. It was the voice she had once known so well, the voice that had once comforted her, that had soothed her fears. But now it was different. There was an edge to it, a coldness she couldn't ignore. "Henry," she started, her voice barely a whisper, as if she were afraid that speaking louder might shatter the fragile connection they still shared. "It's me, Evelyn." A long silence followed. Evelyn could feel her heart pounding in her ears. Was he going to hang up? Would he even care to listen? "Evelyn." His voice cracked slightly, but there was something unsettling about it, something that sent a chill down her spine. "Why are you calling? You should be long gone by now." Her breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean by that? You shouldn't be involved in this." "Evelyn," he said, the words heavy with a bitterness she had never heard before. "You're in over your head. You don't know what's happening." "What's happening, Henry?" Evelyn's voice trembled, desperation leaking into her words. "Please just tell me where you are. I don't understand. Why are you doing this? What is this man doing to you?" There was a long pause on the other end, and then finally a soft laugh, empty, hollow. "You really think I'm the one who's doing this, don't you?" Henry's voice was distant, as though he were speaking to her from far away. "You've never understood, Evelyn. I'm not the one you should be worried about." Evelyn's mind raced. Who was he talking about? Who was the real threat? "Who then?" she demanded, her voice rising in intensity. "Who's behind this, Henry? Who's trying to hurt us?" But instead of answering, Henry's voice dropped into a low murmur, his words barely audible. "You'll find out soon enough, but it's too late now." The phone line clicked dead. Evelyn stood frozen, staring at the receiver in her hand. The words "too late now" echoed in her mind, each syllable like a punch to the gut. Before she could even process what had just happened, a figure appeared at the diner's door. A tall man, wearing a dark coat and a fedora, stepped into the warm glow of the diner. His eyes locked onto Evelyn almost instantly. He was the man from the cabin, the same hollow, menacing eyes, the same cold smile. Evelyn's heart stopped. She backed up slowly, her hand gripping the counter, her legs shaking beneath her. This couldn't be happening, not here, not now. "Hello, Evelyn," the man said. His voice calm, too calm. "I think we need to talk." Evelyn's pulse surged. The diner, once a safe space, felt like a cage now. She had no escape. She had no plan. All she had was fear of what this man would do next. "Get away from me," she cried, her voice filled with panic. But the man didn't move. He only smiled, that same cold, lifeless smile. "You should have listened, Evelyn," he said softly. "Now you're going to see just how deep this rabbit hole goes." The man's smile never wavered as he slowly approached Evelyn, his boots tapping softly against the diner's worn wooden floor. Every step he took seemed to echo in her mind, sending waves of panic crashing through her chest. She backed up instinctively, her eyes darting around the room for an escape. There was nowhere to go. The doors, the windows, everything felt like it was closing in on her. The waitress, who had been behind the counter, now stood frozen, her mouth slightly open as she stared at the man. She didn't move, and neither did anyone else in the diner. The hushed conversations had stopped, replaced by an unbearable silence. "Who are you?" Evelyn demanded, her voice shaky but loud enough to be heard. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he simply kept walking toward her, his gaze never leaving hers. When he finally spoke, his voice was smooth, almost hypnotic. "You don't need to worry about that, Evelyn. You'll figure it out soon enough." With every word, Evelyn's heart seemed to beat faster. She needed to get away. She needed to think, to find a way to protect Lily, to find a way to end this madness. As if reading her thoughts, the man's lips curled into an almost amused smile. "You think running away will help? There's no escape now." Evelyn's pulse quickened, but her survival instincts kicked in. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice firmer now. Despite the fear that gnawed at her insides, his smile deepened. "What I want isn't important. What matters is what your husband has already set in motion." At the mention of Henry, Evelyn's stomach twisted. Was Henry involved in this? Was he somehow part of this man's twisted game? Her mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of their conversation earlier. "Henry, what did he mean? You're saying he knew about you? He's part of this?" The man gave a small, almost pitying shake of his head. "Your husband may have thought he could control it, but it's bigger than him, and bigger than you." To Evelyn, much bigger. Evelyn's breath hitched. Her knees felt weak, but she forced herself to stay upright. "What is it? What's going on?" The man stopped just in front of her, his face now mere inches from hers. She could feel his cold breath on her skin. "You'll find out soon enough, but for now, you need to be careful," he whispered. "Everything you thought you knew about your life, your family, your past, it's all a lie. A carefully constructed lie." Before Evelyn could respond, the man turned and walked toward the exit, as casually as if he were leaving a grocery store. Evelyn stood frozen, her body shaking, her mind struggling to process the full weight of what had just happened. The man had left without another word, but the air felt thicker, heavier, as though a storm was brewing on the horizon. Her eyes turned back to the waitress, whose expression was a mix of confusion and fear. The other patrons were equally silent, all of them sensing that something incredibly wrong had just occurred. No one moved. No one spoke. Evelyn didn't know what to do. She had been hoping for a moment of clarity, something that would make sense of the madness she had been dragged into. But now, it felt as though the world had shifted beneath her feet. The lies were everywhere. Henry, this man. The truth was elusive, like smoke slipping through her fingers. She stepped toward the counter, still trying to steady her breathing. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "Tell me, did you know him? Is he dangerous?" The waitress hesitated for a moment before answering. I've seen him around before. A few months ago, he came in here asking about the people who live out on the edge of town, about people who don't come to places like this." Evelyn's mind went blank for a moment. "Lily and we live on the edge of town," she whispered, more to herself than to the waitress. The waitress nodded slowly. "He's been asking questions about you too, your family, where you live, what you do." Evelyn's chest tightened. It felt like a revelation and a curse at the same time. The man had been watching them, had been watching her, for longer than she'd realized. She turned away from the counter, pacing back and forth. "What am I supposed to do now?" she muttered to herself. Her thoughts were racing, tumbling over each other in a desperate attempt to make sense of everything. Just then, a loud crash shattered the silence. Evelyn spun around, her heart pounding in her chest. The man who had been casually walking toward the door was now gone, but the sound of breaking glass echoed from outside. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she moved toward the door. She could feel it. The danger was getting closer. "Stay inside," the waitress warned, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't go out there." But it was too late. The sound of footsteps, the unmistakable heavy, deliberate steps, grew louder as they approached. There was no mistaking it now. Whoever was outside wasn't leaving, and whatever was waiting for her, whatever this man had set in motion, it was about to come crashing down. Her heart raced, her feet rooted to the floor as she stood in the diner's entrance, watching the shadow grow larger outside. And then the door to the diner opened. A familiar voice. It was Henry. Evelyn's eyes widened in disbelief as Henry stepped through the door, his face drawn and pale. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze in time. The clinking of silverware, the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet murmur of patrons, all vanished into the background. All she could focus on was him, Henry, her husband, but not the man she had once known. He looked different now. There was a haunted, almost desperate look in his eyes. His posture was slumped, his usually immaculate clothes wrinkled and disheveled. The air around him felt charged with tension, as if every inch of him was on edge. "Evelyn." His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. She felt a wave of panic and confusion crash over her. "What are you doing here, Henry?" she asked, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "After everything that's happened, what do you want from me?" Henry's eyes flickered toward the waitress and the other patrons, but he didn't seem to care about the audience. His gaze never left Evelyn. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his words barely audible. "I'm so sorry for everything. Lying to me, for dragging me into this nightmare. What do you think sorry is going to fix, Henry?" He reached out, almost as if to touch her arm, but she recoiled instinctively. The old familiar touch was now a foreign thing, something cold and distant. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Henry continued, his eyes welling with unshed tears. "I thought I could control it. I thought I could protect you." But Evelyn wasn't listening anymore. She couldn't. Control it? Protect me? Her mind swirled with questions. Questions she wasn't sure she wanted the answers to anymore. She had trusted him. She had built her entire life around him. And now he was standing here, a broken man, with an apology that meant nothing. "Who is he, Henry?" Evelyn demanded, her voice trembling with intensity. "The man who came to our cabin? The one who's been following us? What does he want from us?" "And why didn't you tell me?" Henry swallowed hard, his lips trembling. "His name is Damon," he whispered, as if speaking it out loud would make it all real. "He's been watching us for a long time. Watching you, Evelyn. Watching Lily. He has ties to people we shouldn't have ever gotten involved with." Evelyn felt her chest tighten at the mention of Lily's name. "What people, Henry? Who were you involved with?" Henry's face paled even further, and for a moment it seemed like he couldn't even bring himself to answer. "It's too late now," he muttered. "There's no running away from it anymore. He's here, Evelyn. He's already made his move, and it's bigger than anything we can handle. Evelyn's head spun. She couldn't process the weight of what he was saying. She had spent the past days fighting for her life, fighting to protect her daughter. And now this man, this stranger, was telling her it was too late. It was all too much to bear. She stepped back, her hands shaking as she wiped away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. "You're telling me it's too late? That we're stuck in this, whatever this is?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm telling you that you're not safe, Evelyn," Henry said quietly. "None of us are. Not anymore." The air in the diner grew thick with tension, and Evelyn could barely breathe. The realization hit her like a wave. Her husband had been hiding something from her. Something terrible, something dangerous. And now it was too late to undo it. A long, tense silence stretched between them. Evelyn didn't know what to do, what to say. She felt a million emotions, but the strongest one was fear. Fear for herself, for Lily, for everything they had worked so hard to protect. Finally, Henry spoke again, his voice quieter now, barely above a whisper. "You need to leave, Evelyn. Now." Evelyn stared at him, disbelief washing over her. "What? What are you talking about?" His gaze flickered toward the door, and she could see the panic in his eyes. "I'm not the one who can protect you anymore. You have to leave. Get out of here before it's too late." Before she could respond, the door to the diner slammed open again, the force of it sending a jolt of terror through her. A group of men, all dressed in dark clothes and moving with calculated precision, stepped into the diner. Her heart dropped into her stomach. "Damn it, Henry," one of them barked, his voice harsh. "What the hell did you think you were doing? We told you to stay out of it." Henry's face drained of color as he turned toward the men, a look of fear on his face that Evelyn had never seen before. I didn't mean to," he stammered. "I didn't." "Shut up," the man growled, cutting him off. "Get her out of here, now!" The men advanced on them, closing in with a dangerous air. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She was trapped. But something inside her snapped. The fear, the confusion. It was all too much. She turned to Henry one last time, her voice low but full of determination. "You didn't protect me. You didn't protect Lily. And now I see the truth of who you really are." She didn't wait for him to respond. She bolted toward the door, her mind racing. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing. She had to get away from them. She had to get away from him. The men didn't chase her right away, but they didn't need to. Evelyn knew they would come for her, and when they did, they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. As she ran into the night, the dark world around her seemed to close in. She didn't know how much longer she could outrun the truth. But she would keep running. For Lily. For herself. Evelyn's feet pounded against the pavement, the cold night air slicing through her thin jacket. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she pushed herself faster, further, as if the dark night could somehow swallow her whole. Every step felt like a battle. Her body screaming for rest, her mind screaming for answers. Why had Henry done this to them? Why had he let it all spiral out of control? But there was no time to question now. Her first priority was getting to safety. She glanced over her shoulder, but no one was following, yet. But that didn't mean she was safe. Didn't mean they weren't already closing in. She needed to think. She needed to be smart. Evelyn's mind flashed to Lily, her daughter. What if they've already taken her? The thought made her stomach churn. Evelyn had to get to Lily. She had to protect her, no matter the cost. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out, hands trembling, and saw a text from an unknown number. "We know where you are. We'll find you soon. Don't think you can run." Her heart dropped. The message was clear. They knew. They were already close. Evelyn found herself standing at a crossroads, a literal and figurative one. The street ahead was empty, dark and silent, but it felt like a trap. Behind her was the familiar, the places she had tried to leave behind, but they weren't safe anymore. There were no safe places. With no time to waste, she turned left, running toward the nearest alleyway, hoping to lose whoever might be after her. But she wasn't alone. A figure stepped out from the shadows ahead of her, blocking her path. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. "Going somewhere?" a familiar voice asked, and Evelyn's blood ran cold. It was Damon. He stood tall, arms crossed, his sharp eyes glinting in the dim light. Evelyn's entire body tensed with fear. How had he found her so quickly? "I told you not to run, Evelyn," Damon said, his voice smooth but laced with threat. "You're already in too deep. There's no escaping now." Evelyn backed up instinctively, but her mind raced for a plan, any plan that might give her a way out. "Get out of my way," she snapped, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Damon stepped closer, a predatory smile curling on his lips. "You think you can talk your way out of this? No, Evelyn. You're in this for good, for better or for worse." "Where's Lily?" Evelyn demanded, her voice cracking under the weight of her fear. "Where is my daughter?" Damon raised an eyebrow, his grin widening. "Lily's fine for now, but she's not your problem anymore. You are." Evelyn's mind spun. What was that supposed to mean? "No, you won't get away with this." Evelyn's voice was fierce now, no longer trembling. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her. Not after everything she'd already endured. Damon's eyes flickered with amusement. "You don't understand, do you?" He took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "There's no going back. Not for you. Not for your precious daughter. You can't hide from this. You can't run." Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but the alleyway was a dead end. She was trapped. And yet, there was something about Damon's demeanor that didn't sit right. He was too confident, too sure of himself. She was missing something, something important. "You think you have all the power," Evelyn spat, her voice full of defiance. "But you don't. You don't have everything." Damon's smile faltered slightly, but only for a fraction of a second. Evelyn noticed the shift, but before she could process it, another figure stepped out from behind Damon. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Henry. For a moment, Evelyn thought her eyes were deceiving her. Henry looked different. Disheveled, yes, but his face was harder, colder. His eyes were filled with regret, but also with fear. "Henry," she whispered, the name barely leaving her lips. Damon looked over his shoulder and laughed softly. "The man who thought he could protect you. The man who thought he could control everything." Evelyn's gaze snapped between them, confusion clouding her mind. Henry had followed her. Why? What was going on? "You don't need to be scared anymore," Henry said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's too late, but I'll protect you, I swear I will." Evelyn couldn't believe what she was hearing. She felt betrayed, confused, but beneath that, there was something else. Was he really trying to protect her? She couldn't make sense of it. Nothing made sense anymore. "I've got a way out," Henry continued, his voice shaky. "But you have to trust me. You have to come with me." Evelyn stood frozen, torn between the man who had once been her husband and the dark truth that had unraveled their lives. Damon was right about one thing. There was no turning back. But could she really trust Henry again? "I can't," she said, shaking her head slowly. "Not after everything. You've put us all in danger. Henry, I can't forgive you for this." Henry looked down at the ground, his face crumpling in despair. "I never meant for any of this to happen. You have to believe me, Evelyn." The air crackled with tension as Damon's gaze darkened. "Enough talk. Time's up, Evelyn." Evelyn's heart pounded. She needed a way out. Fast. But where could she run? How could she escape this nightmare? Suddenly, she heard a distant siren, a sound she hadn't realized she'd been hoping for. The police were getting closer. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out. "Run," she whispered to herself. And without another word, she turned and sprinted down the alleyway, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Damon's voice rang out behind her. "You can't run forever, Evelyn. We'll find you." But Evelyn didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not yet. Not while her daughter was still out there. Evelyn's heart raced as her feet pounded the wet pavement, her breath coming in short. Frantic bursts. Every footstep echoed through the deserted streets, a constant reminder of how close she was to being caught. The sirens, though distant, grew louder, and she clung to the hope that they would reach her in time. Her mind raced, every thought tangled in a web of fear, confusion, and desperation. Where's Lily? What did Damon mean? She could feel the sting of betrayal sharp in her chest. Henry, her ex-husband, was supposed to protect her, to keep their daughter safe. Yet here they were, running through the streets of their once peaceful town, hunted like animals. But even in the chaos, Evelyn could sense something had changed in Henry. His silence after she had confronted him told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't the man he had once been. The mask he wore, the facade of the perfect family had cracked. But had it cracked for the right reasons? Was he truly trying to protect her, or was there something darker beneath his actions? Evelyn glanced over her shoulder and saw a shadow darting through the alley, closing in on her. Damon. She felt the weight of his eyes on her, the same terrifying gaze that had haunted her for years, and now she was running from him, as if the very thing she had once feared was right on her heels. Suddenly she rounded a corner and came face to face with a dead-end alley. Her breath caught in her throat. There was nowhere to go. Her body screamed for her to stop, to surrender, but Evelyn's spirit refused to break. She could feel the weight of the past crashing down on her. Everything she had worked for, the lies, the pain, the years of silence, had brought her here. Evelyn, you can't run forever, Damon's voice echoed through the alley. His tone was low, cruel, like a predator savoring its hunt. You're out of options. It's over. Evelyn backed away from the dead-end wall, her back pressed against the cold bricks. Panic surged through her chest, but beneath that there was a quiet, steady determination. She wasn't done fighting. Not yet. Suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed from behind her, and Evelyn turned sharply, ready for anything. To her shock, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Henry. "Get away from her!" he shouted, his voice hoarse, desperate. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Henry, what was trying to help her? Was he finally showing her the man he could be? The man he used to be? Damon's expression darkened, a snarl twisting his lips. "You think you can stop me, Henry? You've lost, you've all lost." Henry took a step forward, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. "No, I'm not losing anyone else, not this time." There was a moment of tense silence. For the first time in years, Evelyn could feel the air shift around her. Henry wasn't just standing there, passive and weak. He was taking a stand, but was it too little, too late? "I didn't know what you were into, Damon," Henry said, his voice shaking but steady. "I didn't know about all this, what you've been doing, what you've been planning. But I know one thing, I'm not letting you drag us down with you. I'm not going to let you hurt my family." Damon took a step back, his expression faltering for a brief second. But only for a brief second. The smirk returned, the same smug arrogance that had plagued their lives for so long. "You think you can stop me?" Damon laughed coldly, as if the entire situation was beneath him. "The world's already in chaos, Henry. You think you're going to fix it? You think you're going to fix her? There's no coming back from this." Evelyn's pulse quickened as she glanced at Henry. His face was pale, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something raw, something that felt like the last vestiges of the man she had once loved. "I'm not fixing anything," Henry said, his voice shaking. "I'm stopping it." Damon's eyes narrowed. "You can't stop me, Henry, you won't." Suddenly, the sound of sirens filled the air, louder than before. The police were closer. The distant wail of their sirens was a sign of hope, but it was also a sign that time was running out. Damon had one last move to make. With lightning speed, Damon lunged forward, grabbing Henry by the collar and slamming him against the wall. Evelyn screamed, the noise breaking through the terror in her chest. "No!" she shouted, her voice hoarse with panic. Damon turned his gaze toward her, a wicked smile curling on his lips. Your little knight in shining armor is going to fall. Evelyn, you know that, right? He's just as lost as you are. In a flash, Evelyn's mind went blank, her instincts taking over. She darted forward, her body moving before she could even think. She grabbed a large piece of broken glass from the ground, the sharp edges digging into her skin as she held it tight. "Let him go, Damon," she screamed, her voice desperate. "You don't have to do this." Damon glanced at her, his grip tightening on Henry's shirt. "You think you can threaten me with that? You think that's going to change anything?" But Evelyn wasn't done. She was done being afraid. She was done being weak. She lunged, throwing the glass at Damon's feet, forcing him to step back. In that moment, it wasn't about saving Henry anymore. It was about saving herself, about saving Lily, about ending this nightmare once and for all. The sirens were closer. Too close. Damon's eyes flickered with irritation before he dropped Henry to the ground. Backing away slowly. "This isn't over, Evelyn," Damon warned, his voice cold and final. Evelyn didn't respond. She couldn't. She was too shaken, too broken. She could only watch as Damon disappeared into the shadows, leaving her and Henry standing there trembling, caught between the past and the uncertain future. As the police arrived, rushing into the alley, Evelyn turned to Henry, her heart in her throat. "Is this really it?" she whispered, the fear in her voice unmistakable. Henry's face softened as he stood up, wiping the blood from his lip. "We're not done yet," he said quietly, "but I'll fight for you. For us. For Lily." For the first time in what felt like forever, Evelyn believed him, but deep down she knew that the battle had only just begun. The morning after Damon's disappearance, Evelyn felt as though the world had shifted beneath her feet. The police had arrived just in time to keep him from doing anything more. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a brief pause in a war that had only just begun. She looked out the window of the small, dimly lit room they'd taken refuge in. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, an unspoken symbol of the dark weight that still loomed over her family. Henry had been with her all night, trying to comfort her, trying to convince her that everything was going to be okay. But the man she had once trusted, her ex-husband, the father of her child, was a stranger to her now. The mask he had worn for so many years had cracked, revealing a truth that she didn't know how to accept. And then there was Lily, Evelyn's precious daughter, who had been a silent observer in all of this, her innocent eyes witnessing horrors no child should ever see. Evelyn felt a pang of guilt in her chest as she thought about Lily, curled up in the corner of the room drawing silently in her sketchbook. The child was still processing everything, still absorbing the weight of what had happened. "I don't know if we can fix this," Evelyn said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. She hadn't slept in hours, but the exhaustion wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional. It felt like the entire world was closing in around her. Henry, sitting across from her, shook his head. "We don't have to fix everything all at once, Evelyn. We just need to start somewhere. For Lily, for you." He seemed sincere, but Evelyn's heart told her something else. She could see the cracks in his armor, just as clearly as she could see the cracks in herself. They had both been broken by this, by the years of lies, by the horror Damon had unleashed on their lives. Lily looked up from her sketchbook, her face pale. "Mom, do you think everything will be okay now?" she asked softly, her voice full of uncertainty. Evelyn swallowed hard, her throat tight. She wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, that the nightmare was over. But deep down, she knew that the true battle wasn't against Damon. It was against the fear and the scars they carried with them, the remnants of everything they'd endured. "I don't know, sweetheart," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "But we'll figure it out together." The door to the small room opened, and a police officer stepped inside. It was Detective Miller, the officer who had been working the case. His face was grim, his eyes tired. "Evelyn," he said, his tone professional but laced with empathy. "We need to talk. There's something you should know." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tight with fear. Miller hesitated for a moment before speaking. We've found something that ties Damon to a much larger operation. It's bigger than we thought. Evelyn felt a chill crawl up her spine. What are you talking about? Miller sighed deeply. We've been investigating Damon for a while, but we never had enough evidence to tie him to anything concrete. But now, we've found something. We're going to need you to come in for questioning. There's a lot at stake here, and we need to move quickly. Evelyn nodded, her heart heavy. She couldn't escape this. None of them could. Their lives were forever intertwined with Damon's darkness. And the truth, no matter how painful, had to come out. We'll do whatever it takes, Henry said, his voice firm. We need to make sure he never hurts anyone again. Evelyn glanced at her daughter, who was staring at them with wide eyes. Lily, she said softly, kneeling beside her. Stay here, we'll be back soon. I promise. Lily nodded slowly, but Evelyn could see the fear in her eyes. She didn't want to leave her daughter, but she knew there was no other choice. They had to face the truth. The sooner they did, the sooner they could start to heal. As they left the room, the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on Evelyn's chest. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. They were no longer running. They had come this far, and they were going to finish what had been started. The interrogation room was cold, sterile. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, casting a harsh glow over the table where Evelyn sat. Her fingers gripped the edge of the chair, her knuckles white with tension. Across from her, Detective Miller sat, his face unreadable. Henry stood by the door, his presence a silent reassurance, but even his stoic demeanor couldn't mask the unease in the room. You've been through a lot, Evelyn, Miller began, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. I know this isn't easy, but we need to hear your side of things. What happened with Damon? What did he tell you? Evelyn's mind spun. The pieces of the puzzle were still coming together, but it was like a cruel game she'd been forced to play. Every truth she uncovered only revealed more questions. He told me things, Evelyn began, her voice shaking as she recalled the dark confession Damon had made in the alley. He said things about Henry, about his involvement in all of this. Miller leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What kind of things? Things that didn't make sense, Evelyn said, her voice faltering. But they felt true. He said Henry knew about the things Damon was doing, that he had been part of it, all along. Henry's face drained of color. He hadn't said a word since they'd entered the room, but his silence spoke volumes. Evelyn felt the weight of his gaze on her, but she couldn't look away from Miller. I don't know if it's true, she added, her voice barely above a whisper, but I think Damon was trying to manipulate me, trying to make me believe he was the only one who could save us. Miller nodded slowly, processing her words. We've looked into Damon's connections. He wasn't working alone. We have reason to believe he was part of a much larger operation, one that stretches beyond this town. Your ex-husband, Henry, is at the center of it. The evidence is damning. Henry's eyes locked onto Evelyn's, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of something in his gaze. Regret? Guilt? It was hard to tell. I didn't know everything, Henry said quietly, his voice filled with sorrow. I swear I didn't, but I made mistakes. I can't take them back. Evelyn didn't know what to say. The pieces of her life were crumbling around her. The man she had trusted for so long, the man she had believed to be her protector, was now someone she wasn't sure she could trust at all. Suddenly, the door to the interrogation room opened. Another officer stepped in, holding a file in his hand. His face was grim. Detective, we've got a development. We found something. Something big, the officer said, his voice tense with urgency. Miller turned to Evelyn, his eyes narrowing. We may have everything we need to bring Damon down for good, but this is bigger than just him. It's time we find out the truth, Evelyn. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. The truth? The truth was a weapon, and it was about to destroy everything. Evelyn could barely catch her breath as the officer handed Detective Miller a thick manila folder. its contents weighing more heavily than she could ever have imagined. The air in the small interrogation room felt thick, stifling, as though everything was pressing down on her, crushing her from all sides. She had already learned more than she ever thought she would about Damon, about the lies, the secrets, the terror he had been hiding for years. But now, this new information, it felt like a blow to the stomach. Everything she had known, everything she had believed, was crumbling into dust before her eyes. Miller opened the folder carefully, his brow furrowed as he skimmed through the documents. "This," he said quietly, almost as if to himself, "this changes everything." Henry, who had been silent for what felt like an eternity, took a step forward. His face was pale, his eyes wide with apprehension. "What is it?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. "What did you find?" Miller didn't answer right away. He continued flipping through the pages, his eyes scanning every word. The tension in the room was palpable, each passing second stretching into eternity. Finally, Miller looked up, locking eyes with Evelyn. "We found records, financial transactions, illicit deals, names, lots of names. It's all connected to Damon, but it goes deeper than we expected. There's a whole network he was a part of. And Henry, your name is on some of these documents." Henry's face went ashen and Evelyn's stomach twisted. Her eyes darted between Henry and Miller, trying to process the words. Her brain couldn't keep up with the chaos that was unfolding. "No," Henry said, his voice trembling now. "There's no way. I didn't know anything about any network. Not like that." Miller's expression didn't soften. He turned the folder around, showing Evelyn a series of names, dates, and transactions. Her eyes widened as she recognized some of them. People from her past. People who had once been part of their social circle. But there were others too. Strangers whose presence here sent a chill down her spine. "You can't possibly believe this," Henry pleaded, his voice rising. "You can't believe I had anything to do with this. I didn't know, Evelyn, I swear to you. I didn't know." Evelyn took a step back, her chest tight, her mind racing. Her heart was in turmoil. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to reach out and tell him that this was all a mistake. But the evidence, the cold, hard evidence, was right in front of her. How could she ignore it? "What does this mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It means that Henry isn't just a bystander," Miller said, his voice steady but grave. "He's been involved, directly or indirectly. We don't have the full picture yet. But these records link him to multiple people in this operation. And if we're right, the network he was part of extends far beyond this town." Henry sank back into the chair, his hands gripping the edge of the table as if he might collapse from the weight of the accusation. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I was trying to protect you, Evelyn. Protect Lily. I made mistakes, but this wasn't what I wanted, I swear it." Evelyn's hands were shaking. She didn't know if she could trust him anymore. How much of their life together had been a lie? How much of their marriage, their family, had been built on a foundation of deception? "You've been lying to me for years, Henry," she said, the words coming out sharper than she had intended. Her voice felt like a foreign thing, full of pain and betrayal. "How can I believe anything you say?" Henry looked up at her, his face a mixture of guilt and desperation. "I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to understand. I never wanted this. I never wanted any of this to happen." "But it did," Evelyn replied, her voice barely audible. "And now we have to deal with it." A silence fell over the room. The sound of Evelyn's own heartbeat pounded in her ears. This wasn't just about Damon anymore. It wasn't just about the danger he posed. This was about the man sitting across from her, the man who had once been her partner in everything, who had once been her safe place, and who, it seemed, had always been hiding something from her. "Detective," Henry said suddenly, his voice tight with emotion, "you have to understand, I was manipulated. Damon, he was blackmailing me. He had threats against our family, against Lily. I couldn't see a way out. I thought if I kept my head down, if I didn't get involved, I could protect you both." Miller looked at him for a long moment, his face unreadable. You had every opportunity to do the right thing. You chose to stay silent. You chose to let this go on. Now, we're left cleaning up the mess. Evelyn closed her eyes, the weight of the situation sinking in. She couldn't process everything all at once, couldn't untangle the web of lies and fear that had been spun around her life. But there was one thing she was sure of now. Her life with Henry, the life she had built with him, was shattered. It would never be the same. Her mind drifted back to Lily, who had stayed in the other room, alone. Evelyn couldn't bear the thought of how this was all affecting her daughter. Lily had seen too much already. She'd heard the things Damon had said, the words that still echoed in Evelyn's mind. How could they ever make this right? "We need to focus on getting Damon," Miller said, breaking the silence. "This is about bringing him down. The evidence we've gathered is enough to make a solid case against him. But we can't afford to waste time. The more we learn, the more dangerous it becomes." Evelyn nodded, though her heart was heavy. She was numb, her emotions tangled in knots. But she knew one thing: this fight wasn't over, and no matter what, she would protect her daughter. Later that day, the police raided the old warehouse where Damon had been holed up, gathering his partners in crime. The operation was methodical, swift, and Damon, the man who had once seemed invincible, was finally caught. But even as he was handcuffed and led away, a chilling smile remained on his lips. "I know more than you think," Damon muttered under his breath, his eyes locking onto Evelyn's from across the room. "You think you've won? You haven't even begun to understand what's coming." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as the words sank in. The battle was far from over. This was just the beginning. Evelyn barely slept that night. Her mind was racing, unable to settle, haunted by Damon's cryptic words. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the quiet of the night amplifying the chaos inside her head. She could feel the weight of everything pressing down on her: Henry's betrayal, Damon's threat, and the overwhelming realization that her world was never going to be the same. Her thoughts kept circling back to Lily. How would she explain all of this to her? How could she tell her daughter about the man who had once been her stepfather, the man she had trusted and loved, only to have him shatter their lives in the worst possible way? The sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand startled her. She reached for it, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the caller ID, Detective Miller. "Evelyn," Miller's voice came through the phone, sounding weary but resolute. "We have a problem." Her stomach dropped. "What happened? I thought you caught Damon." "We did," Miller said, his tone heavy. "But there's something you need to know. We've uncovered more of his operations, things we didn't expect. He wasn't working alone, and it's worse than we thought. There are more people involved, and they're not going to let this go without a fight." Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. "What does that mean for us? For Lily?" Miller paused for a moment before responding. "It means you're not safe. Damon has connections everywhere, people who will do anything to protect him. We're doing everything we can to secure your safety, but you need to stay alert. Stay close to us, and don't trust anyone outside of our team. Not yet." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She wanted to feel relief, but there was no comfort in the knowledge that Damon was behind bars. The danger was far from over. "I'll make sure Lily stays inside," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. "Thank you, Detective. Please keep me updated." She hung up and stared at the phone for a long moment, the weight of the reality settling in. Damon might be behind bars, but the terror he had unleashed wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Evelyn did what she could to keep things normal for Lily. She made breakfast, made small talk about the weather, and tried to distract her daughter from the uncertainty hanging in the air. But it was clear that Lily was aware of the tension between them. She had always been perceptive, and today she kept glancing at Evelyn, her expression filled with unspoken questions. After breakfast, as Evelyn was clearing the dishes, Lily asked softly, "Mom, is everything going to be okay?" Evelyn's heart clenched. She had never wanted her daughter to experience anything like this. She had tried to shield her from the darker parts of life, to give her a sense of safety. But now, Lily was living in the middle of a nightmare that Evelyn could no longer protect her from. "I don't know, sweetie," Evelyn said quietly, wiping her hands on the dish towel. "But we're going to get through this together. I promise you that." Lily nodded, though Evelyn could see the doubt in her eyes. She wanted so badly to believe her mother's words, but the truth was that they were both caught in a situation far beyond their control. Later that afternoon, Evelyn was in the living room scrolling through the messages from her friends and family when she heard the knock on the door. Her heart jumped, and she froze. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the knock sounded too sharp, too urgent. She slowly approached the door, her hand shaking as she reached for the handle. She peered through the peephole, and her breath caught when she saw who was standing on the other side. It was Henry. Her mind flashed back to the earlier conversation with Detective Miller, to the evidence that had surfaced implicating Henry in the criminal network Damon had been running. The weight of the revelation crushed her. She wasn't sure if she could face him now, knowing what she knew. But as the seconds stretched on, Evelyn felt a strange pull to open the door. She needed answers. She needed to hear it from him, even if it shattered what little was left of her trust. She opened the door, her eyes meeting Henry's. He looked as exhausted as she felt, his face drawn, eyes filled with regret. "I need to talk to you, Evelyn," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Please, can we talk?" Evelyn stepped back, gesturing for him to come inside. "Come in," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Once they were inside, Henry hesitated before speaking again. "I know you don't trust me right now, and I understand why. But I swear to you, Evelyn, I never meant for any of this to happen. Damon, he had us both trapped, and I didn't know who to turn to. I thought I could handle it on my own, but now it's all coming out. And I don't know what to do." Evelyn crossed her arms over her chest, her emotions a whirlwind of anger, fear, and pain. "How could you hide this from me, Henry? All these years I thought we were building a life together. I thought I knew you. And now I find out you've been involved in all of this. How do you expect me to believe anything you say?" Henry's eyes filled with tears, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I made a terrible mistake. I never meant to hurt you or Lily. I wanted to protect you both. I thought if I just stayed quiet, if I kept my head down, it would all go away. But it didn't. And now we're both paying the price." Evelyn shook her head, the tears threatening to spill over. She couldn't listen to his apologies anymore, not when everything had already fallen apart. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this, Henry," she whispered. There was a long pause, heavy with the weight of the moment. Henry didn't say anything for a while. He just stood there, looking at her with pain in his eyes. Finally, he spoke again, his voice small. "I'll do anything, Evelyn. Anything to make this right." Evelyn's heart wrenched at his words, but the truth was, she didn't know if anything could make it right anymore. As Henry left later that afternoon, Evelyn felt the crushing weight of everything pressing down on her. She had so many questions, so many emotions to sort through, and yet she was still no closer to finding peace. She didn't know how to forgive him, didn't know if it was even possible. And yet the most painful part of all was that even though he had betrayed her, she still loved him. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Miller again. "Evelyn," his voice was tense, "we found something. We need you to come down to the station right now." Her stomach dropped. The story wasn't over. It wasn't even close. Evelyn stood frozen in her kitchen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Detective Miller's words echoed in her mind. The urgency in his voice a stark contrast to the numbness she felt inside. "We need you at the station, Evelyn. This is urgent." The weight of the words pulled at her chest. She had just started to process everything. Henry's betrayal, Damon's manipulation, the life she thought she knew being torn apart, and now, just when she thought things might settle, the storm was starting all over again. She could feel her body tense, her heart racing with both fear and curiosity. "I'm on my way," she said, hanging up the phone before the detective could say another word. Her hand shook as she gathered her things, preparing to leave. Lily was at school, thank God, but she had no idea how to explain any of this to her. How could she make her daughter understand that their lives were still hanging by a thread? The drive to the police station was a blur. Her mind kept replaying the moments with Henry, his apologies, his desperation, but also the crushing realization that even with his confessions, there was so much Evelyn didn't know. Was he guilty of everything Miller had said? Or was he just another pawn in a game too dangerous for anyone to understand? When she arrived at the station, the atmosphere was tense. Police officers moved quickly, their faces grim as they went about their duties. Detective Miller was waiting for her just inside the doors, his expression more serious than ever. "Evelyn, thank you for coming," he said as he led her down a narrow hallway toward a small interrogation room. "What I'm about to show you is going to be difficult to process. But you need to see it. Just tell me what's going on," Evelyn demanded, her voice a mix of exhaustion and determination. "I can't take any more secrets." Miller nodded, opening the door to the room. Inside, a large monitor displayed a grainy video, one that made Evelyn's blood run cold. "This footage," Miller began, his voice low, "was taken from a surveillance camera at one of Damon's safe houses. It shows Henry meeting with Damon several times over the past few months, and it's clear from the footage that he was more involved than we originally thought." Evelyn stared at the screen, watching as her husband, her once beloved Henry, was seen exchanging money and documents with Damon. It wasn't just a few casual meetings. It was an operation. Henry's involvement wasn't just passive. He was a key player in this world she had never known existed. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as the truth hit her like a freight train. Henry had lied. He hadn't just been manipulated by Damon, he had chosen this. He had chosen to protect his own interests over the safety of their family. "You're sure this is him?" Evelyn asked, her voice shaking. This could be doctored. A mistake." "I wish it was, Evelyn," Miller said, his voice heavy with regret. "But we've confirmed it through multiple sources. Henry was involved in more than just the financial side. He knew about Damon's operations. And the worst part? He had a plan to take Lily away." Evelyn's heart dropped into her stomach. "What do you mean, take Lily away? How?" "We don't have all the details yet, but we've intercepted a few conversations that suggest Henry planned to use his connection to Damon as leverage. He was going to use Lily as a bargaining chip to get himself out of trouble." Evelyn staggered back, her hand gripping the back of the chair to steady herself. "No, Henry would never." Miller's face softened with empathy. "I know this is hard to hear, Evelyn, but I need you to understand that your husband's involvement goes deeper than what you've been told. You're in danger, and so is Lily." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Evelyn felt as though the ground beneath her had shifted, and she was now falling into an abyss she could never escape. She sat down, trying to steady her breath. "I don't understand. How could he do this? We had everything. We had a family." Miller sat beside her, his voice kind but firm. "Sometimes when people are trapped in a situation, they make choices they think are the only way out. But that doesn't excuse what he's done. And it doesn't change the fact that you and Lily are in danger." Evelyn nodded slowly, her mind struggling to process the avalanche of betrayal and fear she was feeling. She wanted to scream, to lash out at someone, but there was no one to blame but herself and Henry. He had hidden the truth for so long, and now she was left to pick up the pieces. "Where is he now?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've got him under surveillance, but we're moving him to a more secure location for his protection," Miller replied. "But that doesn't change the fact that there are others out there, other people who are still loyal to Damon, and will stop at nothing to get what they want. I can't promise you complete safety, Evelyn, but we'll do everything we can." Evelyn's hands trembled as she wiped away a tear. "I don't know how to live like this anymore. I don't know how to trust again." Miller's gaze softened. "Healing takes time, but you're not alone in this. You have us, and you have Lily. That's a start." Evelyn wasn't sure if she believed him. She didn't know if anything could fix the jagged hole in her heart. But one thing was certain. She couldn't let her daughter grow up in this world of lies and danger. For Lily, she would keep fighting no matter how painful the truth was. As Evelyn drove home, her mind was a whirlwind. She kept picturing Henry's face, the betrayal in his eyes, the lies he had told her. Her heart ached with the loss, but there was no time for grief now. Her family's safety was the only thing that mattered. When she arrived home, Lily was still at school. Evelyn had a few hours to make plans, to prepare. She couldn't stay here. Not with Damon's men still lurking in the shadows. Not with Henry's influence still hanging over them. But where would they go? How could she protect her daughter from the world she had never wanted her to see? The answers didn't come easily. But Evelyn knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened next, she wasn't going to let this be the end. It was just the beginning of something much bigger, and she would make sure Lily never had to suffer for the choices of the past. Evelyn awoke to the sound of her phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. The light of the morning sun had begun to creep in through the blinds, but her mind was still heavy, clouded by the events of the past few days. She had stayed up late, trying to wrap her mind around everything, trying to reconcile the man she had loved for so many years with the monster he had become. But there was no time to dwell in the past, not anymore. She grabbed her phone, glancing at the screen. It was Detective Miller again. "Hello?" Her voice sounded hoarse, a far cry from the confident woman she used to be. "Evelyn, we need to talk," Miller said, his voice sharp. "I've got news and it's urgent. Can you meet me at the safe house? It's the only place we're sure we're not being watched." "Safe house?" Evelyn repeated, her pulse quickening. "What's going on?" "I'll explain everything when you get here. Don't trust anyone right now, Evelyn. Not even your closest friends, just come alone." The phone clicked dead before Evelyn could say anything else. She stared at the screen for a moment, her mind racing. She had no choice. She needed answers. The morning light filtered through the small kitchen window, casting a glow on the once comfortable space. It felt foreign now. Everything had shifted. The house she had poured her heart into now felt like a prison. Evelyn knew she had to leave. For Lily, she couldn't protect her here anymore. Henry's web of lies had grown deeper than she ever imagined, and now Damon was out there, waiting to reclaim control. But Evelyn wouldn't let that happen. Not to her, and certainly not to her daughter. She packed a bag with only the essentials, clothes for the next few days, a few toiletries, and a picture of Lily and herself from happier days. It was all she could carry, no time to waste. She left the house without a word, the heavy silence hanging in the air. For the first time in months, Evelyn didn't feel the need to hold on to the past. The pieces of her life were scattered, broken beyond repair. But she had one thing left to fight for: her daughter. The drive to the safe house was a blur, the weight of what was at stake pressing down on her chest. Her phone buzzed once more, and she took a shaky breath as she glanced at the incoming text message. It was from Henry. "I'm sorry, Evie. I never wanted any of this to happen. I just wanted to protect you. Please, I'll make it right." Her heart squeezed in her chest. It was too late for apologies. The man who had been her partner, the father of her child, was no more. In his place was a stranger, a man who had willingly chosen the dark side. He had betrayed everything they had built, and no apology could ever undo that. Evelyn hit delete, her finger shaking as she did so. There was no more room for him in her life, no more room for the lies. The safe house was a small, discreet building on the outskirts of town, tucked away behind high privacy walls. She parked the car in the designated spot and stepped out, her nerves on edge. The door opened just as she approached, and Detective Miller stepped out, looking worn but resolute. "Evelyn," he said, his eyes scanning the empty street behind her. "We don't have much time." She nodded, her throat dry. "What's going on? What did you mean by not trusting anyone?" "We've been investigating Damon for months. But there's something I haven't told you," Miller said, lowering his voice. "There are more people involved than we initially thought. People within the police force. People who've been helping Damon for years. And your husband? Henry was one of them. Evelyn's breath hitched, but she didn't let it show. She had already known in her heart, but hearing it confirmed made the weight of it all even harder to bear. I've been trying to piece this all together, Miller continued, his face grim. But the deeper we dig, the more dangerous it gets. I need your help, Evelyn. I need you to trust me one last time. We've got to take Damon down, and the only way we can do that is by getting the evidence we need to expose him. We'll need you to testify, and it's going to be risky. We can't protect you forever, but if we act quickly, we can bring him down. Evelyn swallowed hard, the fear creeping back into her chest. Testify? Against Damon? Miller nodded. And against Henry. The words hung heavy in the air. Evelyn couldn't believe what she was hearing. The man she had loved, the father of her child. Would she really have to stand against him? To condemn him publicly? I'm not sure I can do that, she whispered. How can I look at my daughter and tell her that the man we thought was her father was someone else entirely? I know it's hard, Miller said, his tone softer now. But you've already been living with the truth. You've seen the damage he's caused. And there's no going back. It's time to move forward. For Lily, for you. Evelyn's mind swirled. She had always believed in the idea of justice, of standing up for what was right. But now, with her own family in ruins, could she really put everything on the line? Could she expose Henry, knowing it might tear their daughter apart? There was no choice. She couldn't live in fear anymore. She couldn't let the darkness of the past control her future. I'll do it, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. For Lily. Miller placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression softening. We'll protect you, Evelyn, and we'll bring him down. The promise of safety, the hope of redemption, it felt like a fragile thread in her hands, but it was all she had left. As Evelyn walked into the safe house, the weight of what was to come settled over her. She didn't know how this battle would end, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't running anymore. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling of dread as she sat in the sterile, dimly lit room of the safe house. Detective Miller had left to gather the rest of the team, and for a brief moment, Evelyn was alone, trapped with her thoughts. The room was small, with minimal furniture, a single bed, a chair in the corner, and a wooden table in the middle. On the table was a file. The contents of it had the power to destroy her life, and yet she knew she couldn't back down now. Inside that file were the last pieces of evidence needed to bring Damon and Henry to justice. It was enough to prove that Damon was behind a network of corruption and violence. It was enough to expose the betrayal her own husband had been a part of for years. Her hands trembled as she reached for the file, the paper stiff under her fingertips. She took a deep breath and opened it. The documents were filled with codes, addresses, names, things that had no meaning to her at first glance. But then, one paper caught her eye. It was a list of transactions. The handwriting was familiar. Henry. Her heart stuttered. There it was, clear as day. Henry's signature, acknowledging deals, transactions with people she had never heard of before. People she would later come to know were involved in the darkest corners of society. He knew everything. Evelyn slammed the file shut, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She felt like the walls were closing in on her. This wasn't just about Damon. This wasn't just about the betrayal of her husband. It was about a whole network of people who had been pulling strings behind the scenes, manipulating her life without her ever knowing. The door creaked open, and Detective Miller stepped back into the room. He gave her a concerned look, his eyes filled with something close to empathy. He could see the weight of the evidence in her hands. We need to move fast, Evelyn, Miller said, his voice calm but urgent. Damon's on the move. We've got him cornered, but we can't wait any longer. I don't know if I can do this, Evelyn whispered, her voice shaking. All these years, I thought I knew him. I thought I knew Henry, but now... She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. Now I see what he's been hiding, what he's been a part of. He's not the man I thought he was. Miller sat down across from her, leaning in. I know it's hard, but you can't let him have this control over you. He's done enough damage. It's time to take it back. Evelyn nodded, her mind racing. She had to be strong for Lily. She couldn't let the evil Henry had been a part of define her family's future. She had to be the one to stop it. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, her heart nearly stopping. It was a message from Henry. I'm sorry, Evie. I didn't want to hurt you. Please come home. We can fix this. The message was a betrayal in itself. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry because he was losing control. She knew that now. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was trying to reel her back in. Evelyn didn't respond. Instead, she tossed the phone aside, her hands trembling from the decision she was about to make. We have to expose him, she said, her voice stronger now. We have to expose everything. Miller's face hardened with resolve. And we will. But this has to be done right. We can't afford to make a mistake now. Evelyn stood up, determination flooding her veins. It wasn't just about taking down Damon anymore. It was about taking down the system that had allowed men like him, and Henry, to thrive in the shadows. Where do we start? She asked, her voice steady. We've got a plan, Miller replied, opening the door to the next room where the team was gathered. We've been tracking Damon's every move. He's got a network of safe houses across the city, but we know where he's going next. This could be our one shot. Evelyn nodded, her mind already focused. This was it. The moment of truth. That evening, Evelyn, Miller, and the small team of law enforcement officers gathered at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. It was a place that would have been forgotten by most people. Quiet, desolate, a place perfect for shady deals and dark business. But not tonight. Tonight it was going to be the place where it all ended. We have to move fast, Miller said, looking at each person in the room. Evelyn, you'll need to stay behind us. If this goes wrong, you need to be out of harm's way. Evelyn didn't flinch. She had already faced the worst that could happen. She wasn't scared anymore. This wasn't about her survival anymore. It was about exposing the truth. For Lily. Let's go, she said, her voice firm. They moved swiftly through the darkened streets, past shuttered storefronts and down narrow alleys. The weight of the mission hung over them, but Evelyn had never felt more alive. She was ready to confront the past, to face the man who had once promised her everything and who had taken so much. As they arrived at the warehouse, the tension in the air thickened. The team moved quietly, taking their positions, and Evelyn felt the pull of adrenaline surge in her veins. This was it. The final confrontation. She could see Damon now, the man who had used her life as a pawn in his twisted game, the man who had taken her husband and turned him into a shadow of the person he had once been. Her heart pounded as she watched him enter the building. She couldn't look away. Everything had led to this moment. The cold wind cut through the streets as Evelyn, crouched behind the corner of the warehouse, peered around the side. She could see Damon's silhouette through the cracks in the warehouse's rusted doors. The flickering lights inside told her everything she needed to know. This was the moment. There was no turning back now. Behind her, Miller and the team were in position, ready to move. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat a drum of fear and anticipation. The weight of everything that had happened, everything she had learned, pressed on her like a physical burden. 8-year-old girl calls 911 after locking herself in room and says 3 words when the police arrive. Everyone is in shock. Stay close, Miller whispered, his voice low and tense. We move in 3. Evelyn nodded, taking a slow, steadying breath. She thought of Lily, the image of her daughter's smile, her tiny hands clutching the stuffed bear Evelyn had given her so long ago. It was that memory, that love, that gave her the strength to move forward. Everything she had done, everything she had sacrificed, was for her. 3, 2, 1. At the signal, the team sprang into action. They rushed to the door, taking it by surprise, shattering the silence of the night. The clatter of boots against the concrete and the crash of the door slamming open reverberated in Evelyn's ears. And in the chaos, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. hope. A flicker, a tiny spark of light that hadn't existed before. Inside the warehouse, the confrontation was swift. Damon, caught off guard, didn't stand a chance. His face, usually so composed and calculating, now twisted with panic and fear. He attempted to escape, but Miller was faster, cutting him off with a practiced move that left Damon no room to maneuver. "End of the line, Damon," Miller said, his voice steady, firm. Evelyn's gaze locked onto Damon, her breath catching in her throat. She had never seen him so vulnerable, so human. But there was no sympathy left inside her for him, no part of her that cared about his pleading eyes or the words that began to spill from his mouth. "Evelyn," Damon said, his voice cracking. "Please. You don't know everything. It's not what it looks like. I know enough," she interrupted, her voice steady but cold. "I know everything I need to know." She took a step forward, her pulse roaring in her ears. "You're not going to control anyone anymore." Damon's face tightened, and for the first time in their entire relationship, Evelyn saw the monster he had been hiding all these years. The polished persona, the smooth talker. The man who had once been her partner in life. All of it crumbled away in an instant. "I did it for us," Damon muttered, desperation clinging to his voice. "For you, for Lily." "No," Evelyn snapped, her voice like steel. "You did it for power, for greed, for control." The words were a knife, each one cutting deeper than the last. She could feel the weight of her past with him, the lies, the secrets, but she also felt a new kind of strength, one that came from knowing the truth. There was nothing more for him to take from her, nothing that would break her anymore. Miller approached Damon, handcuffing him with swift efficiency. "You're done, Damon. There's no running anymore." As the police led Damon out of the warehouse, Evelyn remained frozen in place. Her thoughts swirled, her memories, her regrets, her pain. But even in the face of everything she had lost, she felt something else now, something she hadn't known she'd been searching for. Peace. The past wasn't gone, and it would never fully be. The scars were too deep, but they no longer had the power to dictate her future. It was hers to claim. Hours later, Evelyn sat in a small diner, the warmth of the coffee cup cradled in her hands. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but she didn't mind. But she looked out the window at the city below, watching the lights flicker in the distance. Miller sat across from her, a rare moment of calm between them. The case was far from over, but the battle was won. Damon was in custody, and Henry had been exposed. But there was more to come. The rest of the network would fall. Piece by piece, and justice would be served. She looked up, meeting Miller's eyes. "What happens now?" "You start over," he replied. "You rebuild, and you keep moving forward. That's all any of us can do." Evelyn's lips curved into a faint smile, but it was the kind of smile that felt real, that felt like a new beginning. "You're right," she said softly. "But this time, I'm doing it for me, for Lily, for our future." Her phone buzzed in her pocket and she pulled it out, finding a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. It's about Henry." Her fingers hovered over the screen, and for a moment she almost put the phone down. Almost. But she knew, deep down, that there was still one more piece of the puzzle to solve. One last chapter she needed to close before she could truly move on. With a deep breath, she typed back, "I'm listening." As she sat back in her chair, the weight of everything that had transpired still felt heavy on her shoulders. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was finally free. The truth had been set loose, and with it came a sense of liberation. The past was behind her, but the future, her future, was just beginning.